I'm gonna trash all of your favourites. I'm not sorry. But I am hot. It is very, very hot in here. Which, let's be honest with ourselves, is probably just going to contribute to me being grumpy and end up with more books thrown across the room. I know you're not sad about it. Hi guys, it's Leanne and I am here today for a massive book unhaul. That's right, I'm getting rid of everything, all the things from all the genres. They have to get out of my house now. I'm done. Over the last many weeks of me not reading, I have instead been weeding. I have been making big gaps like this one that you see behind me on my shelves. I've been very honest with myself. This is a process that I have been going through over a couple of years now and I've got very good at it. I want to quickly level with you guys before I get to the fun part where I throw things. I come from a household where material possessions were more important than people. Let's just not put too fine a point on it. My mum used for a coping method most of her adult life gathering stuff. She didn't have a lot of people in her life or any confidence to gather more people in her life, and so what she did was she collected things. As an adult, it has taken me a very long time to understand that A, I don't have to keep everything that comes into my house, and B, it's actually very healthy to get rid of things. You guys know that when we first moved into this house we had a pretty horrific house fire. Nobody was hurt, everybody was fine, including fur babies, but a lot of stuff got damaged and a lot of things had to be thrown out and we started again with a lot of stuff. And you know, more than anything else in my life, it has been the biggest lesson that stuff is just stuff. I love my books, I love my library, I love my collection. It's incredibly important to me that I keep these words around me that have shaped me as a person, because I fundamentally believe that that's what books are really there to do. Even if they are pieces of entertainment, every single one that you consume changes how you think just a little bit, and the really, really amazing ones change how you think a whole lot. But with books, I hear people say to me all the time, I don't know how to unhaul books, I don't know how to give them away, I don't know how to DNF a book. And to that I say to you, when you bought that book, it gave you a lot of excitement and a lot of joy, and you had it on your shelves and you looked at it and it was a promise of something else, and now it's turned into not that. Now, if you're being honest with yourself, you're never going to read it, and so you get the opportunity to pass on that promise to somebody else. Somebody else is potentially going to love that book way more than you did. Potentially that book is going to be somebody else's game changer, and so getting it out of your house is not throwing something precious away or throwing money away. You had an experience from that book, even if you didn't read it, and it's perfectly fine. In fact, it's encouraged to pass that experience on to other people. So now that you've had some of my deep philosophical ramblings, let's get on with tossing things, shall we? I really have not planned this at all. I just have a big trashy pile of trashy books next to me and I don't know where to start. Okay, I choose you. See, decisive decision making, that's how we do it here on this channel. The first book that I am getting rid of, I am throwing away with a very heavy heart. It is The Trouble with Goats and Sheep by Joanna Cannon. It is a book set in small town England in the 70s during the big heat wave. It has two child protagonists who are trying to find out what happened to one of their neighbours in their cul-de-sac. All of the hallmarks of this say that it should be a Leanne book, but I've started it twice and it just isn't holding my interest. Both times I ended up drifting off the page and rereading pages again and again, and I just don't think it's going to happen. I saved it from my last unhaul, but I'm sorry, she gotta go. The next two are also hurting me a little bit. In my last unhaul I got rid of two John Irving books because I was just perfectly honest with myself that I was never going to pick them up, and I have to just admit that as much nostalgia as the Cider House Rules holds for me, and as much as I think Hotel New Hampshire sounds creepy, character study and really twisted, I don't think that I'm ever going to pick them up. The next one I've got is The Queen of Bloody Everything by Joanna Nadine. Again, this is another book that on the surface could have been really, really good for me. It's an adult daughter telling about her really turbulent childhood and kind of the ramshackle way that she grew up and the family that she idolised because they were completely normal, but it just felt like a lot of legwork to get where we were going. Ugh. Next up I have When the Lights Go Out by Mary Kubica. There's no way for me to tell you why I hated this one without outright spoiling it, so I'm going to put my hand up, and when my hand goes down, the spoiler is gone, okay? Essentially, this was all a dream. Yeah. It did a Dallas at the end. It's all a dream. It's all a dream. And, what was the purpose? I just don't understand this trope. Next book that I've got is Into the Water by Paula Hawkins. I'm a little bit sad about this one. The reason I couldn't get into this is because there are so freaking many perspectives that once again I never really felt like I knew any of the characters enough to really give a shit about them. I also kept getting confused by which woman was who and who got related to who by what, and it was just really, really confusing. Okay, next up we have Rules for Vanishing by Kate Alice Marshall. I'm going to give this book props for a couple of things before I throw it. So the first thing is, I didn't actually realise that there's a silhouette in between these trees, and I guess that's less a prop for the book and more a prop for the book designer, but I really liked that. I think it's really clever. It took me a little while for my eyes to adjust, and then when I did I was like, ugh. But you know, in a good way. This one is supposed to be a sort of YA mystery slash horror where one girl's, I've forgotten everybody's names now because I just gave no shits. Becca went missing, and she went missing in these woods, and apparently that if you go missing in these woods you've been taken by somebody and it's a big legend. And then her sister decides one Halloween maybe, or the anniversary, I can't remember, to go into the woods and to try and find her. It's dumb. This is written in like newspaper extracts and testimonies and interviews, and because of that, I almost threw it away just by instinct. Because of that, the author is trying to give you conversations and moments that have happened between other characters from the point of view of the character who's telling you that, and I never really ever felt like I got that. What I felt like I got was a really heavy-handed, like, narrative hand. I could feel the author telling you that you were meant to feel things. I know that some people really like this book as well, so I guess it just didn't land right for me, but yeah, I kind of hated it, and yeah. Okay, what else did I hate? Yep, okay, you guessed it. Next up we have The Murders at White House Farm by Carol Ann Lee. I have really gone into why I hated this one in a couple of places, mostly in my catch-up video where I told you guys what I had finished from my big abandoned book stack. In short, this one is a true crime novel, and it goes back like 3 generations before it starts, so before you're actually invested in anybody who's in it. It tells you the history of the family for a really long freaking time, a really long time, and then like this much, maybe this much, this little tiny portion in the middle is the crime, and then the rest of it is just Carol Ann Lee having a lot of conversations with Jeremy Bamber that I don't care about. I don't care about the mystique that he wants to perpetuate about himself. I care about the victims. I care about the people that are left behind, and this again just wasn't that. Really sad about this one too. This is Scottish crime. This is All the Hidden Truths by Claire Askew. It is essentially fundamentally about a shooting that happens in a college and about why this atrocity happens. It's bad enough that we have heat. Do we also have to have bugs? Fortunately, it did that thing that a lot of detective novels do for me, where it fell very much into like reciting facts over and over again and again. I wasn't getting any emotions from the characters. Here are 2 books that I am getting rid of for the same reason. They both have awful fat-shaming content. Just no. This is the 3rd book that I've picked up from Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekinen. Each of them I have liked a little bit more than the last, but they've all had something fundamentally wrong with them. And in the first 10 pages of this book, we are told that the girl essentially has OCD without saying it, and that one of the things that she used to record was her weight because she got a horrible comment at school that scarred her, and that would have been fine. But then literally 2 paragraphs later she then says, oh, but it's alright now because now I'm obsessed with recording my workouts because now I've got strong instead of fat, and that's better. I'm not going to throw it because it's a hardback, but the spirit is there. The spirit is there. Then next up we have The Sculptress by Minette Walters. I don't think I've ever been so angry. I can't even be funny about this one, guys. I don't think I've ever been this furious about fat representation in a book in my entire life. This book is about Olive. She is in a mental health facility after having been convicted of killing her mother and her sister and cutting them up into small bits and making little models out of them, essentially. And then, for whatever reason, I forget now, this particular newspaper reporter gets a chance to go in and interview her. And she goes into the prison, and I'm not gonna... I debated with myself, like, should I read you this because it's so incredibly bad. So bad. But I've decided not to because fundamentally I found it so damaging that I was furious about it for days afterwards. When Olive walks into the room, she is described in the most horrid way as being gargantuan, as having folds of flesh, as her feet pointing out in opposite directions because her thighs are too big and she can't walk straight. I mean, really horrendous, really like damaging language. And then it's just compounded by on the very next, that's on the first page by the way, but on the very next page, a story about the guards laughing at her because she got stuck on an assisted toilet and had to be like levered up by guards because she's too fat to live with any dignity apparently. And I personally don't care if later on the author then has the investigative journalist find that Olive is a person of worth. She should have assumed that she was a person of worth at the start, and she shouldn't have assumed her worth based on the amount of weight that she carries with her. I don't want to give it to anybody. I'm literally going to put this in the bin. I'm putting it in a separate pile and it's literally going in the bin. Well, I mean, it's going in the recycling because then it can maybe be something useful. Next up, I have got Extremely Loud and Incredibly No, I wasn't going to get through that. Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close by Jonathan Safran Foer. I really wanted to get on with this one. It's a movie that I have watched and absolutely loved, and I love that there's pictures and diagrams and things like that included in this. I was not in a very good place at the time with death and dying and losing loved ones, and that's of course primarily what this book is about. It's about a little boy who loses his dad in 9/11 but decides that there's a bit of a mystery about his dad that he needs to solve. And also I felt like it was a little bit too wordy. It is a child narrator and I didn't really feel like I was listening to a child narrate his experience. I felt like I was listening to an author narrate a child's experience for him. This is like my second battery change. Can we work with me here please, camera? It is very hot. Okay. I am finally done. I'm putting it out there. Do you hear me, universe? I am done with Shari Lupina books. I am not going to buy any more of them and torture myself with them because every time I buy them, I freaking hate them. I always pick them up because I think to myself, that premise sounds really good and writers improve with time. But Shari Lupina, for me, it's just not one of those writers. Shari Lupina writes characters who at the start I feel like, oh, I'm quite hooked, I quite like you, and then they do something just dumb. I have the same issue with Tana French where her characters are great right up until the last like 100 pages of her gigantic novels, and then they press a self-destruct switch for no reason other than it's a good cliffhanger for the book and it makes you realise how gritty the series is, and it just makes no sense. Now I will also own that this is a criticism which is also frequently levelled at Ruth Ware, which as you can see, Ruth Ware is definitely one of my favourite thriller writers. I feel like her books are thrillers like candy floss for the brain. They just go down really easily and make you really happy when you're reading them. But I also acknowledge that people get really frustrated with her books for the exact same reason, so this just might be a taste thing, but I am breaking up with Shari Lupina. Gone. Okay, goodbye. Oh, this is an interesting one, and this is going to really annoy some of you because these books are not in order. This is the Painted Man series, or at least the first 4 books of it, by Peter V. Brett. These books harken back to a time when, for me, I was buying books a little bit unhealthily. I would often buy full books in a fantasy series, like as many as were out, or a sci-fi series, or you know, anything like that, before I was properly emotionally invested in them. I don't do that anymore. I have a rule about buying only one book from an author or a series until I've read it and I know whether I like their style. Small exception for like Gillian McAllister because she's amazing. Oh, we have a problem. The books are fighting back. What's interesting about these books is that I am not actually getting rid of them because I have read them and disliked them. I am actually getting rid of them on the recommendation of lovely wife Helen. So frequently I will recommend things to lovely wife Helen and she will read them before I have picked them up, or even before, you know, I own them. She actually reads more books than me in a year because she listens while doing everything. It is also a series wherein there are two factions. One is very obviously white and Western, and one is taken from Arabic culture and Muslim religion in general. And what lovely wife Helen felt was that the first book was amazing, the second book was okay, but it was a second book, and then the third book did a couple of things that actually really offended her. She felt like there was definitely a split between how the two factions were portrayed, and that the Western factions were always portrayed as being quite, you know, saintly and doing things for the greater good and being positive, good characters, whereas the Arabic characters were, or the Arabic influenced characters were frequently portrayed as savage and doing things that didn't make sense just to further their own actions. And I just don't have time for that shit, guys. It's very, very seldom that lovely wife Helen will actually like come through in the middle of an audiobook and be like, I really didn't need this and need to talk about it. Like, it's very seldom that she will do that, and she did that several times while reading the third book in this series. These books are huge. I have many other fantasy series on my shelves, and I have to admit that the more fantasy I read as like a 30-plus-year-old adult, the less I like male fantasy writers. Next up I have The Stranger Upstairs by Melanie Rabb, and interestingly enough, this is one of those books where the blurb on the front is absolutely accurate. This is perfect for fans of The Couple Next Door. It has similar kinds of characterizations and plot twists as the author of The Couple Next Door, and guess who that author is, guys? That's right. Sabotage. It's Shari Lupina. So just saying. Next up I am culling, which is, you know, devilishly appropriate for this particular book. The Ritual by Adam Neville, not because I didn't like it. I actually really enjoyed this and I really enjoyed the adaptation of it, but I won't read it again. Next I have The Trauma Cleaner by Sarah Krasnstein. It's not really about trauma cleaning. I probably wouldn't have picked this up just as a memoir on its own if I wasn't looking for an interesting look at people who clean up these horrible, horrible scenes. That's what I was hoping that it was going to be, and it isn't. That's very, very loosely something that it's eventually about, but it's not really about that. And the other reason is I don't really like Sarah Krasnstein's writing very much. And the thing is, Sandra Pankhurst herself is such a really interesting person that I think even if this hadn't been what I wanted it to be, but the writing had been better, I would have been like really in it. But I've also tried it on audiobook and I just don't care, so this one's going. That's sad, very sad. Next up I have A Winter's Promise by Christelle Dabos. This is a stunning book. It's an absolutely beautiful edition. I was so excited when Europa sent it to me because this is actually one of the first fantasy novels that they have ever published. This is translated from the French, and on the surface all of this should have been a big pro for me. The thing that really hooked me in was that the main character's ability is to travel through mirrors, and that just spoke to me on like such a, I was so excited. But this one is a pacing problem. I don't know whether it's the translation, because that sometimes affects both pace and like tone of character for me. I didn't feel like this one was paced properly. Like something will happen and then there's just like a chunk where I'm just like, what's the next thing? And it's such a big book. It's another one that's just like huge. Like it's basically 500 pages. Like essentially 500 pages. And I just... Ooh, next one I've got one that I think I need to duck before I tell you about, because I think Jim will kill me. This is Bloom by Nicola Skinner, and I DNF'd this, guys. I don't often DNF middle grade books. Usually I'll finish them to the end even if they're not particularly doing it for me because they're so short. But this one, Jean and many other people out there absolutely loved this, so maybe this is not one to take my opinion on. The reason that I DNF'd it was because at the start of this novel we get this very sort of fantastical tale about this little girl who goes to like a funnily named school, and all of her like friends are kind of caricatures, and all of her teachers are caricatures, and everybody is like just pretty awful, and it felt very Roald Dahl, and I was very there for it. It was kind of Matilda at the start. I was really enjoying it. And then the little girl goes home to her house, and abruptly we're back in the real world, and it felt like two different books. It felt like on the one hand it wanted to be this very Roald Dahl, very quirky, like you're gonna get a lesson in the end of this, but it's gonna be very tongue-in-cheek till you get there. And then it felt like it wanted to be this very grounded in reality novel, but with a little hint of fantasy that was going to be kind of like allegorical and pull the whole thing together. And I just didn't feel like the two married up. I felt like I was reading two different books, and in the end I just gave up because I didn't really care. It didn't transport me enough. So really, really sorry, Jean. Really sorry, but this one's going Oh, another one that I'm really sad about is Unearthed by Amy Kaufman and Megan Spooner. Kirsty, my lovely podcast partner in crime, is absolutely going to skin me alive for this one. This is essentially archaeology in space with love. That's essentially what it is. Amy Kaufman is one half of the writing duo that wrote the Illuminae files and the Aurora series. The Aurora something. The other one. And I love those books, but this one just didn't work for me. So I don't know whether it is the addition of Megan Spooner's writing that just didn't make it for me, or whether it just... I don't know, this book just feels like it lacks something, like it lacks a spark. Like I don't feel hooked by it, I don't feel compelled to keep picking it up. I just ended up sitting there for like a really long time. But I mean, it is essentially Indiana Jones in space for YA with some like love interest on the side. So if you're interested in that, this is the book for you. Oh, actually, there's one more. Okay, so I am also getting rid of If We Were Villains by Emma Rio. This is the proof. I've kept hold of it for ages and ages and ages, for that time when I wanted to read something which was about dark academia, which was basically The Secret History, but I didn't want to reread The Secret History. And then recently Emma, lovely Emma, read this and said it was shit. So quite happy to part with a book on that basis alone. So that's it, guys. That is all of the books, all of the very many books that I am getting rid of. I'm not gonna lie, there is another pile at the side of me here, but when I like looked at all of these and split them up, my reasons for getting rid of the rest of the books here are very different. Like I have multiple copies of them, or I have some of them on my Kindle and they don't need to take up space on my shelves, or I've read them and they brought me a lot of joy, but now I want to pass them on to friends who really want them. So there is another whole pile here. In total, I think I've got rid of this time around about 150 books. Don't let that fool you, because quite a few books yesterday and the day before made it into my house in two very large deliveries. Sorry, not sorry. I really love filming these videos for you guys. I really love being salty about books that I didn't like. So please come and be salty with me in the comment section, which is basically my channel brand at this point. Did I actually trash any of your favourite books? I'm very sorry if I did, but you know, you can tell me off, it's fine, we like opinions here. Are there any books on here that you completely agreed with me about? Would you have you tossed them before? Have you thrown any of these books across the room? I want to hear about it. And of course, if you have any alternatives to any of the books that I have shown you here, books which have the same kinds of themes or the same kinds of plots but you think are better, please also tell me about them, because my wish list is looking a little bit empty these days, and you know, the girl needs to keep up with that stuff. I will be back with you guys very soon, so until then, take care and I will speak to you later. Bye! Too energetic. Not enough air.